Welcome everyone, and welcome to Munos Rivas. I'm just going to introduce you just for a second, Luz. And those of us who remember you back in the day remember you as a drama student and a deeply wise and wonderful person. And as you were a drama student, what I didn't realize was that you were also acting. Oh, well, of course you were acting, but you were also dancing and singing, and you're teaching now. Let's dive in with what you're doing now. Tell us about your teaching, and it's really pretty diverse.
I am a private vocal instructor for young students here in this area, and I've taught them not just everything that I've learned from music education in terms of strategies and ways and methods to be able to be more effective in terms of teaching, and they're being able to grasp whatever musical concept we're covering. But I'm also delving into learning a little bit more about the linguistically and culturally diverse communities in my area. And so I've been able to interact with students who have come to this country, either seeking asylum or refuge of some sort. And they're really very, very excellent, very focused students who simply have a foreign language barrier. You know, there's not just the culture shock, but there's this inability to communicate sometimes just their basic needs. And so I'm delving into my studies by applying myself in the way that I'm training to receive a bilingual education advancement certification to attach to my professional.
Wow, that's now you already have some professional teaching credentials. Yeah, you went back, got a master's. Yeah, what did you do to prepare yourself for teaching?
It's interesting. I feel that my family helped me a great deal. All the support that I received from them since I was very, very young, encouraging me to further my education. I started off, you know, very, very, very strictly brought up, I guess you would say. You know, I was encouraged not just to study, but to really become a professional in something. And so I went to the High School of Performing Arts. I had auditioned, and I also had auditioned for music and art. I was accepted to both and picked performing arts. After I did that, little did I know that I would be offered a record contract by the time I graduated and was starting my first year in college. So I signed the record contract and just started working because, you know, I needed to support myself as well. And I realized that this was work. I could work and do something that I loved at the same time. I wanted to finish my bachelor's degree though. And so in between all the performance and stuff, there was just so much to do. I had to pretty much take a sabbatical, almost like wait a little bit. In the meantime, I fell in love with my producer, you know, who had been my friend for forever and a day, really, before he did become my producer, and then finally my husband. And so we had 2 sons, and they're my life, they're my joy.
Wow.
And so I started throwing all of what I've learned throughout my lifetime at that point to them. I started just passing it down. So my oldest loves to sing. My oldest loves performance. He's not afraid to stand in front of a camera and be honest and truthful and share his talent. He has a wonderfully classically trained voice. He's 20 years old now, and he's attending Brigham Young University. And at the same time, while he's there, he joined the men's chorus. He's a wonderful tenor. I have a second son, and he's serving a full-time mission, 24 months, all voluntary, proselyting. At the same time, it's doing community service and helping the Latin American communities there. He had to go to a language lab for 6 weeks in order to polish up his foreign language skills before he was transferred and sent to where they needed him. So that's where he's at. While they were little, that's when I finished my bachelor's. Wow. It was while they were sleeping.
How'd you do that? I mean, I'm a guy, and when my kids were little, I could barely think. How did you finish your bachelor's while you were raising those
Well,
kids?
I think it would have been almost virtually impossible considering how meticulous I was about taking care of them.
Yeah.
The only way, and I honestly do say that this was the only way that I was able to do it, is by having my father fly in
Wow.
and take care of him. Yeah.
Where'd your
He took
dad live at the time?
San Antonio, Texas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Wow.
he flew in every semester
Wow.
and he watched over them while I studied. And it was challenging for me,
Yeah.
to resume college coursework and
Yeah.
and really do well.
Yeah.
And
Where'd you
I've
do it?
always I went to Stony Brook
Stony
University.
Brook. Yeah.
Yeah, so I transferred my credits from Brigham Young University to
Yeah.
Stony Brook
Yeah.
University, which
And
they accepted wholeheartedly. Mhm.
didn't you tell me you studied music at Stony Brook?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I studied music there, focused on vocal performance,
Wow.
and it was a rigorous program. It
Yeah.
wasn't very easy. It wasn't piece of cake. I had to really.
Oh, yeah.
It was like learning a new language
Yeah.
altogether.
Yeah.
My background was mostly theater and
Yeah.
learning, method acting and voice and diction, and focusing on my speech, and but as far as musicianship and learning, perhaps what music literacy is what we would, term it, learning about intervals and progressions and honing in, my piano skills, those things I had to delve in and really, really cultivate that soil and become good, become good at it.
What was it? What was the vocal department focused, or was your training focused on classical vocal repertoire? Did they give you a range, or?
It's interesting. I had released a record singing dance music, which was
Oh,
basically club music.
yeah.
And it was something, I guess you would think of as terms of New York, um, music sung like by Cynthia, Sapphire, Coro. This is 1980s, late 1980s. Taylor Dane. I
Mhm.
was on the stage with her and, all of these artists. And this is what I sang. I had been singing rhythm and blues with a band since I was 16, going to auditions. And this was while I was in high school.
Yeah.
But classical, hardly touched it
Yeah.
in my youth. So at Stony Brook, I was singing, uh, repertoire that I had never heard of, but for some reason they thought I sounded great, and they were like, you can actually do this if you're interested. And I was like, opera? What else do you have? They said jazz. So I sang jazz.
Wow.
So
At
they had
Stony Brook?
at Stony Brook
Yeah.
that I was
Yeah.
singing jazz.
Well,
They had a big band. It was
yeah.
wonderful. I sang big band music, Ella Fitzgerald,
Wow.
Billie Holiday.
Wow.
It was wonderful singing with them, and having the band behind you is just, there's
Wow.
nothing like it. Nothing like it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, I know Stony Brook is really, highly respected school. There are graduates of LaGuardia, who compete for the top conservatories, and they may decide to go to Stony Brook, and master students at Stony Brook who come from all the, very competitive conservatories around the country. So it's a,
Yeah, the
popular
master's
place.
program is
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. Um, so you're studying in the program, you're singing jazz, but it sounds like they had you doing sort of like classical theory and ear training and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a requirement, core requirement. I
Yeah.
had to have that the first 2 years. The second 2 years, then I had to involve the performance aspect. We always had to present in front of a form of a jury,
Yeah.
um, all of that. And then for some reason, I was kind of fiddling my thumbs because I almost felt like I was sitting at the piano for too long and I wasn't moving.
Yeah.
So I tried out their dance program, and
Wow.
Stony Brook has a dance program
Wow.
there. And I minored in dance, so I started taking flamenco,
Wow.
and I was dancing ballet there. So that's what I minored in. When I finally graduated, I had majored in music and minored in dance.
All of this while having two small children.
Yes.
That's
The cool
amazing.
thing is,
Yeah. That's,
you know, the only way you can do it, David, is have them join you. So my little son at 10 years of age, you know, when I would sing, I had him sing with me. When
wow.
I would dance, he would dance with me.
Wow.
Like we just took salsa classes maybe 2 years ago
Oh
just
my
because
goodness.
I wanted him to learn. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no other way of learning other than teaching it first in the home, really.
Yeah.
Um, they could learn ways to dance with their friends outside, but you know, those types of things, I believe that they should begin in the home.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, that's how I did it, at least.
Well,
Taught them how to
well,
sing and dance at home.
yeah.
Hmm.
I want to do a couple of things. I want to go back to your early, childhood, because you talked about your family, how important that is. But I also want to pick up on something that we talked about a little bit earlier. You talked about being at PA, and how what being at PA in the drama department really exposed you to, or immersed you really in the discipline of acting. A lot of us think that, well, acting is acting, it's intuitive, it's kind of, fuzzy, but you really understood it as a discipline. And of course, music is a discipline. And what was it like to go from studying acting to studying music, of course, to studying dance? And did you take the sense of having to learn a craft? Well, it sounds like you obviously did take the sense of learning to have a,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah,
study a craft
absolutely.
and
You
do it
have
really.
to.
What's that like sort of inside your head, inside your heart, when you devote yourself to that kind of discipline?
I believe that the discipline that came from the drama department, their performing arts, is basically what brought to fruition performance. You
Yeah,
know, something that was visually, aesthetically beautiful.
yeah,
If you don't have discipline, if you don't show up to your rehearsals, if you arrive late, if you're not dressed to work,
yeah,
then you're just not ready. But this is some of the there were many things that they required of us, of course. But one of the first things freshman year, you needed to show up with your black leotard and tights every day.
wow,
If not, you were given a U, you were unprepared. You
huh,
were unprepared to work.
wow,
And so we all had to show up with, you know, our leotard, comfortable clothing to work with. Another thing was we were getting scripts, and they weren't just, you know, the whole entire play. We were required to go look for the play at the library, the drama library, you
mm,
know, and take out the play, read it, study the characters, write a character analysis. And we were taught how to do that if we didn't know how.
yeah,
So basically, we needed to take what we had at school, bring it home, study it out, come back with something that was of our own. And I think that takes discipline, because a lot of us will go home and do homework. It's like, I'm done. I just want to get this over and done with.
yeah,
But yeah,
totally,
well, you know, some of it is a lot of writing, and yeah, you know, you get tired, obviously. But I think that because there's a passion there in the whole environment about what we're doing,
mm,
we're looking for opportunities too to be able to apply those things outside of school.
yeah,
And I think that's what happened to me, was like, oh, you know, I always wanted to be a singer, really.
yeah,
I wanted to sing. And so there I was. Now I was junior year, and I auditioned as a singer
yeah,
while I was studying, you know, for drama, you know, and doing all of the projects that were required. So um, in essence, I almost felt like they gave me the wings
yeah,
in order to fly. You know, they gave me wings, but I had to flap my wings. I had to use my muscles. And
yeah,
that's where the discipline comes. And you can't not sweat. You have to sweat
yeah,
it. You need to understand that you must sweat it before you break a muscle, you know, coming out of your skin. You have to exert. And sometimes it takes a little suffering, you know,
yeah,
to get there. And so that's what I learned. It takes a bit of sacrifice. It
mm,
takes a bit of humility
huh,
to get to that place.
huh. What were the points that, where you felt like it was a little bit of suffering? What were the sacrifices for you, and the things that humbled you? How'd you deal with that?
I think what was most difficult for me was illness in the home. Whenever
Mm,
there was illness in the home, and I knew that I couldn't, you know, give my best, you know, because I was dealing with something at home.
Are you talking about
And
your kids or your husband or your parents or?
I'm talking about my parents, you
Yeah.
know, when they became ill, and I was basically seeing the switch, you know, of them caring for me when I was ill, and now I was the one who needed to care for them and put them first. And so there was a bit of struggle like that through high school. You know, I saw that a lot. Mhm.
Can I ask, and you know, you don't have to, you know, you should
Sure, sure.
share what you're comfortable with, but did your parents have chronic illness through high school?
My mother did.
Oh, I'm so
My
sorry
mother
to hear
did.
that.
And all of my friends in drama knew that,
Yeah,
especially when we did a lot of emotional recall exercises,
yeah,
you know, and we had to express things that were sort of personal and
yeah.
just to get to the honesty. Yeah, my mother, she was exemplary. She was intelligent. She's the one who sang to me as a child. She's the
Wow.
one who she was a seamstress, and she also owned a hair salon back in
Mm,
Colombia.
mm,
So she would literally take my measurements, you know, sew a dress up that looked like a gown.
wow.
She'd hand me a brush because that was the mic. And I was 6 years old, and there I was singing my own repertoire in front of all the guests.
Wow.
And that's how my mother, you know, encouraged me since I was 6 to not be afraid and to sing. And then she would sing to me. She
Wow.
sang to the whole entire family. This was like every Monday night for family home evening, we called it. And I never forgot it. I think that's something that I will never forget. And I'm passing it on to my sons. They both sing. So
Wow.
I'm sure, I guess that hopefully they'll hold on to that and carry that legacy.
Wow. Wow. Um, can you tell us what happened with your mother?
Yes, yes. She suffered from mental illness. It was depression,
Oh,
anxiety.
wow.
hmm And it was very difficult for her to cope with
Mhm,
certain things. She had a lot of tragedy.
mm,
Her father had actually died from a stroke when she was just, I guess she was 22, but she was the oldest.
wow.
And so she worked really hard at trying to keep the family and and my grandmother together. You know, she was the kind that was more like a counselor.
Mm.
Meanwhile, my grandmother was like the fist. She's like, I have to be mom and dad. You got to get this done. But mom was like, it's like, you got to understand them. This is the stage you're going through. You need to understand their feelings. You know, don't be too hard, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, it was a difficult time for her. And then she came to the States. And so I think that severed some of the relationship, that knit relationship she had. And I think it kind of affected her too. She would get depressed about that.
Mm, that's so
hmm
hard. That's so
It
hard.
is. And
Hard for kids.
nowadays, I think that's what touches me the most when I see students who have families who have come in from other countries and are trying to find themselves here, and they're having that problem with language, and they're having issues with understanding the culture, things like that. And I go, wow, you know, I remember my mom talking about that. I remember myself, you know, struggling with the language, knowing that I only heard Spanish in the home.
Mm,
But when I stepped out of my home, I was expected to speak English, and
mm.
it was a bit of a struggle, you know, being little. You know, I came very young. I was only 3.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And it's helpful to me. It helps me to empathize
Mm,
and be a little bit more intuitive in that way, more helpful
mhm.
to students who are going through that.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I can only
Yeah.
imagine. Um, and is your mother still with us?
My mother just passed away last year.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear
hmm
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you speak about her with a lot of love and a lot
Oh,
of
yes.
understanding.
Yes,
Yeah.
always. She's an inspiration.
Wow.
You know, she
Wow.
always will be. Mhm.
Well, tell us more about your family's coming to the United States. You were born in Colombia?
Yes, I was born in Cali, Colombia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Cali is a place that where culture, you know, you're talking about dancing, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're dancing next Saturday and the following Saturday after that, and maybe we'll just go to the festival, which lasts maybe about 2 to 3 weeks, and dance every night until the morning hours."
Yeah.
That's Cali. You know, they have ferias. They call them ferias,
Oh,
carnivals.
wow. You've been there? Have you been?
I was there. Well, no, I haven't come back.
Yeah.
I wish I could,
Yeah.
but I did go back to Colombia when I was 8.
Yeah.
And I visited, and oh, it was gorgeous. I
Wow.
went to Santa Marta. They have beautiful beaches there. The water is so blue, you could see the fish just right at your feet. It's gorgeous. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard. So your family leaves Colombia. What brought your family to the States?
My father, he owned a business. He actually sold music,
Huh.
and so he had a chain there. He decided to close the businesses and come to New York to work,
Uh-huh.
and he wanted to organize himself here with my mother in order for us to get everything, all because they always saw it as a land of opportunity for their children. And so they arrived here actually before we did. I was just 6 months old when they decided to fly into New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I was left with my aunt along with my siblings. And they came and they organized themselves here. My father got a very good job with the union and work, everything as far as benefits,
What did he
medical.
do? What kind of job?
Uh, he actually worked in a factory. He actually worked building gates for professional, I guess you would say, businesses that required protection. You see them a lot in Queens, those gates that come
Oh
down.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he
You
worked.
always wonder, like, these things are like all over the place, and you wonder, well, where do they come from? Well,
Yeah, well,
they,
Flushing.
wow,
Flushing, New York.
wow, Flushing Gates.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
So your dad got work in the factory making these plates.
Yeah, hard work.
Yeah.
Hard work, and he was working very, very hard. He turned really like so good at what he was doing. He finally became foreman like 20 years
Wow.
later. But initially, being novice and everything, I remember it was really hard work on his hands,
Yeah.
dealing with materials. But he did it. He did it.
Wow.
Hmm.
Did he ever talk with you about the contrast between having his own business in Colombia and then coming here and having to be having someone else as your boss and having to do this hard physical labor?
Yes,
Yeah.
very much. I feel almost like I became his counselor.
Oh, really?
And yeah, poor guy, yeah, because he worked so hard, and the language barrier was an issue. I remember he couldn't speak English very well, and so basically he just followed directions, And we joke around nowadays because he's beginning to slouch a little, and
Mhm.
so he'll go feed a miss, and I'll be like, yep, that's him. He'll follow directions and be very meticulous about his work. And he'll be like, yeah, I'm listening. What do you need? At your service.
Mm.
And so that I learned from him. He was very, very good that way,
Mm.
very proper in that way.
Mm.
Um, in terms of his feelings, yeah, he shared with me moments when he felt unappreciated. And I didn't understand it until perhaps maybe junior year,
Mm.
when I wrote to him a note. And I remember he saved it for years, and I remember writing him a note that expressed my appreciation for everything that he was doing for so long, and how I didn't like money because of the fact that it was something he was always having to work so hard to earn for us.
Yeah.
And I told him that to never doubt my love for him, because uh, I saw what he was doing for us and that it didn't go unappreciated. And he saved this.
Yeah.
And I think he told me that he loved me for that. That he loved me for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Sometimes,
yeah.
yes.
No, I was
Um,
thinking, I'm sure your father, well, I'm sure both your parents loved you unconditionally, just the way you talk about them. But I can imagine as a father, or as your father, getting that note from you, I'm sure that meant the world to him.
yes.
Well,
Yes, it
imagine.
did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, and it's really remarkable that you realized that at such a young age that your parents came here for you. So do you have siblings?
Yes, I
Yeah.
have two brothers.
Yeah. So you could have these
Hmm.
opportunities, and really
Hmm.
incredibly powerful to hear about. Um,
Yeah, I think the reason that we were able to understand that, my siblings and I think it was because we were constantly engaged in whatever it was that they needed to
yeah,
do by acting as interpreters. We're always translating
yeah.
everything.
What was that?
And
What was that like? What did you have to do, and what did that feel like?
gave me a sense of duty.
Yeah,
At first it was kind of like, as a child, you say, "Oh, it's such a pain in the neck. I can't go to school because I have to go to, the doctor's office with my mom because I need to translate everything for her so that the doctor knows what she's feeling." And then as I got older, I started realizing, my mom really, really needs this.
mm,
My father really appreciates this.
mhm,
And and I could see in the interactions that they had with the people around them
mhm,
that whenever they presented me as the interpreter, they would say it in a very proud way, "This is my daughter.
mm,
She will interpret for me."
mm,
And it wasn't like, "Hurry up and interpret, tell him, did you tell him this?" It was nothing like that.
mhm,
It was nothing like, "Did you do that?" It was nothing like a nagging thing. It was more like, put their hand on my shoulder and
mm,
then say, "Okay, just tell them what you know."
mm.
And I would interpret, and the doctor would respond, and I would interpret. And then the engagement was very free flowing,
Mhm.
no criticism. Everything was understood, very peaceful.
Mm.
And I that stayed with me.
Yeah, it sounds like your parents gave you a lot of respect for that.
Yeah, they did. They
Yeah,
did.
yeah.
Yeah.
And did you ever sense a vibe coming from the people your parents interacted with, particularly like the professional people, the doctors or the teachers or anyone like that?
Yeah, like the vibe, like it in terms of how they reacted to my being an interpreter. Is that
Yeah,
what you?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they would say, "You have a good daughter."
Oh,
They always said something like that. They were very kind.
that's
And my mom, knowing that I was always, I wanted to be a doctor. I wasn't thinking of becoming a singer or an actress when I was very young. And so whenever I had questions on biology or something like that, and we were doing analyzation of chromosomes and things like that, and trying to figure out, uh, based on the DNA, what color eyes you're going to have. Remember that? Anyway,
oh yeah, oh yeah. Punnett
remember that?
squares, Punnett squares.
Yeah,
The recessive and the
yeah.
dominant traits. Boom, boom, boom.
Yes, dominant, recessive. Yeah,
Love
I
that.
remember
Yeah,
approaching the doctor, and my mom would say, "Well, ask him. He's right here. Ask him what he thinks, about blood types and all that." And so I would. My mom always encouraged me to engage with professionals without fear.
yeah,
It didn't matter how old I was.
yeah,
And I think that that was a good tool for my mother. I thought that was actually smart of my mom to do that,
yeah,
to
yeah,
encourage me to do that. Because there's so many, I see students even in college, they're afraid to approach the professors
yeah,
with any form of questions. They're
yeah.
so intimidated. But my mother did not think that that was a wise thing.
Mm.
The wiser thing is to ask, and ask many questions, and to meet with your profession. No, I mean, not your profession, your professor, one to one, face to face, ask questions.
Mm.
That's how my mom, thought that I should approach things. And I believe that it's the right way.
Yeah, yeah. Um, where do you think that basic sense of self-esteem and self-respect came from for your mom that she imparted to you in that way? Where do you think that came from for her? Or how do you see it, like kind of in your family?
I think she actually believed as as a believer does,
Hmm.
a person who believes in Judeo-Christian type beliefs,
Yeah.
that we are all children of God,
Hmm.
that we are all entitled to respect.
Yeah.
We're all entitled to love,
Wow.
to sharing appreciation, to being kind,
Hmm.
giving others a benefit of the doubt.
Hmm.
I can see it also, I sympathize because she was so gentle. I could see, when someone was maybe like being underhanded about something, and I would explain things to her, and she'd be like, "Oh yeah." But my mother was never like a person to criticize,
Yeah.
automatically a person once she met them. She
Yeah.
wasn't like analyzing, you know, that wasn't my mother, you know. So I think that that's something that comes from her background. She honestly would teach us that we're all are connected in some way, and we all have a divine nature, and whether we choose to tune into it or not, it's our choice. We all have that freedom to choose, but that we, the ones who believe, we're obligated to share that with
Mm-hmm.
others.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a responsibility. It's like almost like a citizen's duty, you know,
Yeah.
to be kind to one another, to be courteous.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. You know, one of the things when I reflect back on being at PA and at LaGuardia is that there was no such thing as, there was no mold for any student. And
yeah,
that applied to a lot of things and applied to family backgrounds. You know, every student's family had a story. And obviously your family and you have this incredibly rich story. What was it like for you? You started in PA as a ninth grader, yeah?
yeah,
So
on
what, you're what?
46th Street.
Yeah, so you're 13 years old, 14 years old, right?
Yeah,
I think you grew up in this deeply bonded household with very strong religious values, you've told me, and here you come to PA. What was it like, sort of that first day, and how did you kind of take it all in?
I was so excited,
Yeah,
but I was scared too
yeah.
because I kept hearing the teachers say, "Welcome to PA," and then I would get like these vibes like, "You better stay up to the requirements because if not, you're out." You know, that kind of feeling. There was this sense of like, oh boy, I better step it up, you know, and stay on top.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And in terms of socialization, I was not a social butterfly. I was friendly, but I wasn't, you know, always engaging and trying to do what everyone was doing or hanging out in the front. But I was always observant,
Mm-hmm.
and and I appreciated the seniors, you know, who were such, you know, especially there was this one senior, I think I mentioned him to you before. His name was Guy. I don't remember his last name, but he had this, you know, 80s Jewish fro, you know. And he would come and engage all of the freshmen to do voice and diction exercises, and it was all, you know, about what to do to tie today a minute or two to, you know, it was just wonderful. And good blood, bad blood, good blood, bad blood, you know, and repetitive, all this, you know, enunciation and learning all of these things, and that stayed with me. And I think that's what, I guess you could say, that's what tantalized me into staying engaged in this, you know, aesthetic, in this
Yeah.
form of, you know, expression. And so I think that it was the students who were performing well and being disciplined and showing their excitement for the arts, that I think that's what kept me excited and not discouraged by perhaps things that were different for me. You know, like I couldn't, like nowadays you wear torn pants and that's the trend, you know. My mom would never allow me to wear torn pants. You know, she was sewing dresses for me, you know, and she knew how to cut hair and she made sure it was neat and clean.
Uh-huh.
Um, and you know, I believe that that could have maybe turned me off. You
Mhm.
know, maybe I could have, I might have been intimidated, but these were good students. These people who were picked, these children, you know, teenagers that were selected for a reason. And
Mhm.
they had this honesty, they had the talent, you
Mhm.
know, and they impressed you. There,
Mhm.
there was no way you would have a cabaret night, and that's when you saw them all come. It was almost like, I don't know, how can I explain it? It's almost like Judy Garland when she's seeing all the munchkins come out and all this magical stuff starts happening. That's when cabaret night and the Christmas, you know, show, and the seniors come out and they show their stuff. And I think that was also very exciting for me freshman year to see.
Sounds kind of magical the way you describe it.
Yeah,
The
yeah, that's how I
manifestation
remember.
of going from the person who, who looks like a person like you and me, but kind of inside has these gifts, and then gets to show them, and it's almost like another world being created, the way you describe it.
That's exactly how I saw it. I think that's even how I remember it. And nowadays when I create something, I think magic. We just had a reunion.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? And Jay and
Unfortunately,
I
I
were,
couldn't go.
oh,
Believe it or not, that reunion I think was like 3 years ago, maybe even 4 years ago at this point.
yeah, it was 4 years ago
Yeah.
now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I had to think,
Well,
you know,
yeah, I remember organizing the program because I said, why don't we have a cabaret show? And so I made sure we had the dancers, and I made sure that I was singing, with a mic. My son was right next to me. We were singing, the original record that was released in the late 80s. We had just, of course, we
wow.
updated it. It sounded a little more techno, you know, and remember how I told you that I taught my sons as much as I could about, art and things like that. My husband really loves Kung Fu, and he found Shaolin Kung Fu.
Wow.
And so he had them taking classes, and of course, who else joined them?
Yeah. Wow.
Mom. So I was there.
Good for
Yeah.
you.
So I took that, the creative person that I am, I took the Shaolin Kung Fu stance, and I created a movement so that all the dancers would be doing the same Kung Fu stances in the beginning of the program. And then we pretty much interwove, modern dance to it along with my music. And it was just the most, I can't tell you how fun that was,
Wow.
to be able to do that. And so, especially on the stage there, at LaGuardia, High School of Performing Arts and Music and Art. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that sense of magic, the spontaneity, the creative process, bringing in what turning it into something more. I love that.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So wait, let's pick up your story where we left off. So you're at Stony Brook and you study voice, and you study classical voice, and you do jazz performance, and you study dance, and then you're done. And then
Then I'm
what
done.
happens?
And then what
You,
happens?
you
Oh
you pull
dear.
off this amazing thing by doing all this work with these two little kids at home. Then what happens?
Oh my goodness. Well, my brother, who is a MIDI composer, he took the song that we had created in 1986, 87, and he turns it into a 2000, 2008, 2009, 2010 version. He just keeps editing it and editing and changing it and forming it into this new type of sound, and, keeping my vocals. And finally now I'm sending him vocals, in the form of MP3s. My voice is great for some reason. I'm like, how did this happen? It's like, it must have been all the hard work, I guess, and it again, I think I was able to share this new rendition of Heart's Desire, with the faculty at Stony Brook University, and they used it for a dance workshop. And so what I did mostly was take what I had and started kind of showcasing it whenever I could. But it's been mostly community service, and it's mostly for a cause. Like we had Whammy, we had a couple of experiences. We had the Intrepid engagement where, they had this behavioral celebration for members of the military who had suffered PTSD. And so I sang the national anthem there.
Wow.
And yeah, and, things like that. This is all voluntary though, mostly. So that's basically what I've been able to do, is a lot of voluntary work, especially because my sons are my priority. I wanted to be there for them if they needed me. I didn't want it to be all so far away so that I wouldn't be able to participate in whatever they were doing in terms of growth. And so basically that's what I started doing immediately after that. Then I realized that I could teach.
Hmm.
but I needed certification requirements.
Mhm.
And so Stony Brook University doesn't offer that.
Mhm.
Music education is not available. So I looked at Hofstra,
Oh wow.
and that's where I went. Yeah.
Oh,
So I
and
went to Hofstra.
what did you study? What did you study at Hofstra? What was your certification in?
It was, I had focused on curriculum studies, music education.
Wow.
hmm
Wow.
Yeah. It was pretty intense. It was so much reading. I was dying to perform. It was tough. Yeah, I remember just methodologies, learning about all the theories, and falling in love with the whole thought of multiple intelligences and how
Yeah.
children are born, with these. Sometimes they are gifted, and how to create lesson plans to accommodate,
Mm.
or build up,
Yeah.
and to be challenging enough for them to be engaged, and not too difficult for the ones who have struggled in some way or form.
Yeah.
So this is differentiated instruction, that I'm referring to,
Yeah.
and then of course core came in, the core curriculum, and just there's a whole wave of a universe, that I was introduced to in terms of education, and that's what Hofstra offered me. It was
Well.
very illuminating. I did get to sing in Hofstra once, though. It
Oh
was
yeah.
nice. Yeah, I was accompanied by, his name was David Lama, and he's a professor there. And he played this beautiful, I think it was a Venezuelan ballad.
Hmm.
And it was beautiful. And so they asked me to sing it, and I sang it. And
Well,
it was just one performance at Hofstra, but I remember it very well. It was very
well.
nice.
How do you work with your students? Like when you work with your students and you think of pulling all this together, right? Because as education isn't a kind of prescriptive thing. It's not like you learn all the theory and then all of a sudden you go out and you do it. It's sort of, my experience is sort of like being a performer in that, or being an artist in that you have all these different tools and you bring them together in this unique environment. I mean, so how do you,
Yeah.
yeah. So what's it? How do you work with students? What's it like for you?
Well, you're absolutely right. In terms of creativity, it is, you have to be an artist in order to be able to engage the students. There's so many distractions.
Mm.
Uh, and it even depends on the setting. Like if you are teaching in a public school, then, you're going to have to pull up a very strict and structured plan for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
because you need to maintain the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Once they come into the classroom, they need to know that you're going to maintain it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not like by having the ruler like back in the day, and no. You have to come up with ideas and keep very consistent
Mm-hmm.
management
Mm-hmm.
of what they do when they come in, when they come sit down, when they see something on the board. What do they do? Are they supposed to do something that's written down? Things like that. Or are they supposed to come in and then sit down and then remember a good morning song? Are there certain things that are required while they're singing? Are they supposed to just sing it or pretend like they're singing it, like some kids do that, or are you asking them to, okay, no, I need for you to really sing it,
Yeah.
things like that. And the classroom environment is so different from the private setting,
Yeah.
being able to teach one-to-one. Um, right now, virtually singing is different too, but it's just as engaging too.
Mm.
And so it really depends. You need to interview with your student to figure out if there are any, like cross-cultural boundaries or borders,
Mm.
so that this way they know, and um, what their identity is all about. This is important too, because now you're respecting them. And if you respect them, they will respect you as well,
Wow.
on
Wow.
one-to-one.
Wow.
Mhm.
What can you share? Maybe what some of those experiences are like, where you're maybe seeing some of those boundaries and how you work through them and how you communicate the respect and what happens when you do that?
Sure. In a public school setting, I approached um, some students who had come in from China,
Hmm.
and um, they had difficulty. They could speak some English, but when it came to singing, it just didn't sound right to them. It didn't sound like something that they would be interested in. So sometimes they had a tendency of mocking, you
Hmm.
know? So what I needed to do is to let them know that this was something that they could have fun with,
Hmm.
that they could find common ground somewhere in this. And that's really the challenge, is finding where is the common ground with the student who is thinking, this doesn't even sound right to me because it's English, it's not my language, it's not coming from my own culture. And so that's challenging. To be able to find the common ground is really my goal. So if I could find something that interests them, if I could find perhaps maybe even some repertoire that they would suggest we could use in the classroom, then I would bring it in, as long as the lyrics are good and they're clean and we can have fun with them, introduce it. Um, I had a friend who's a Mandarin teacher, and she taught me nursery rhymes for my little kindergartners.
Hmm.
And so I learned how to sing, in Mandarin. And that helped me a great deal, because now whenever I have a friend, a little friend, a student friend, who is Chinese and they speak both English and Mandarin, I can greet them, ni hao, and they'll know what I'm saying. We can sing, a song like Jiao Pang Yo, which is Would You Be My Friend? And things like that. So if I could find a song that would connect with the student, I'll try and learn it. And that's what I do. Same thing with Hispanic, families, children who don't feel comfortable. I'll find a song that they might know. The little ones are usually simple. Los pollitos dicen, the little chicks are singing. That's a very, very popular nursery rhyme. And so, but I feel honestly, David, that I do very well with the little ones.
Yeah.
The older ones are a lot more a challenge for me. um, but but of course, the older ones are just precious, because now you're able to see them really delve into the art form and the craft, and they can do a lot more advanced stuff, which is for us, as teachers, it's like, yeah, that's what you want to see, when they get into the Mozart and the Bach, or they start looking at Liszt, it's just like, whoa, but is there a point where I feel like, oh, I don't know. I guess there's always that moment as a teacher where you're like, oh, okay, that didn't go so well. Let
What
me
do you
see what
do?
I can
What do you do when
figure out.
that happens? We've all got those moments. What do you, how do you deal with that?
When something like that happens, I start thinking, what are other sources or resources I can utilize? Um, there are some students who simply don't know how to stay quiet or remain quiet.
Yeah.
I need to now look into whether they have an individualized education plan. Is it something out of their control? Is it something that they're treating with medication? I need to know.
Yeah.
So I have to follow up with that. What are some strategies that they're offering in order to teach them and become more effective,
Yeah.
and help them to engage and not be intimidated or offended? Because those things, some things are out of their control, and it's not fair. It
Yeah.
isn't fair, and we need to realize that it's not fair. This dilemma that they go through every day. It's a personal dilemma, and we need to understand that. So patience is required always.
Yeah.
And using a little bit of intelligence psychology
Hmm.
along the way. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Does that
So,
help?
oh, yeah, I mean, it totally does. I mean, the thing you left out, which I think is common to a lot of people, is, well, the first step when things don't go so well is you beat yourself up internally, right?
Yeah, that's
That'd be
exactly
so
right.
stupid or
Oh, that didn't go
mindless.
well.
And the unfortunate, I mean, it's a funny thing. I mean, we can have a whole other conversation about how arts training sort of makes that better or worse, right?
Yeah.
Because common to all the arts training you describe is kind of getting the critical feedback, which I see it through my son who's studying to be a classical pianist, right? You have to early on be willing to take that in, not just tolerate it, but really
Yeah.
kind of hunger for it. I was
Mhm.
just talking to someone about, I once heard Gary Shandling talk about getting notes, right, from an older
Mhm.
comic and how you're like
Mhm.
grateful for the notes. But the notes mean here are all the places where you're, messing up or not doing well, or this could be better.
Mhm.
So as an artist, you really have to be, it's almost like a spiritual practice. You have to take that on in some way. And that's really hard.
Yeah.
That's a really hard muscle to develop. And so,
I like
uh,
the way you say that
yeah,
because it's so true. I remember taking criticism very well in certain stages of my life, and now I'm in my 50s, and there are certain things that I'm like, I don't understand that criticism. It's like,
yeah,
okay, what did I do wrong? And I realized that I really need to exercise some humility and and delve into what it is that was critiqued so that I could figure out, okay, where did that come from? And perhaps maybe, oh, okay, that makes sense. Okay, maybe that's their perspective on this. I have to look at it with a different form of lens,
yeah.
as opposed to my typical one, which might be a very defensive one.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure, sure. So let me ask you, I mean, it sounds like the work that you do, whether it's performance work or whether it's teaching or just the work in your family, you give so much of yourself. Um, I shouldn't say work in your family. It sounds like, your family is such a blessing for you and nourishes you. I don't mean to just
Oh, no, 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 no.
like
But
that.
I think you're right, Justin, that
Yeah,
it does take work.
yeah,
I'll be quite frank, it takes work. And you have to be committed
yeah.
to the work. And that's what I find that, there's a lack of in terms of family, maintaining a family unit,
Mm-hmm.
and keeping the solidarity intact. And I saw that even when we were kids, I didn't see marriage as being a priority in a lot of people's, minds. Um, Not even keeping a relationship, happy was prioritized. Um, Granted, we were teenagers. We're not supposed to think those things. We're supposed to just delve into our career, our goal, and focus. Beautiful. That's correct for that time period. But I don't believe that you need to negate the idea that ultimately you are not going to want to be alone at the end of this life,
Mm-hmm.
and that you need to learn through socialization and through the proper ways of maintaining some form of standards for yourself and for your spouse, those things, and keeping them solid. So but that takes work. You see, it doesn't just come out from the sky like, oh no, you work for it. If you're going to study something and make it work, even with your craft, right, what do? You go to the library, take a book out, study about what the composer is all about, or the methodology that you're engaging in terms of acting. If you're going Stanislavski method, you take out books and you study. I say take out stuff about how to keep your husband and your wife happy, how to understand your children, how to keep the family engaged in things together, learning how to work together, having fun, having some form of conversing, like my son, actually, he's very wise in this. He said that when he was serving a mission, he had to be with a companion at all times. This was required. And there were moments when they would be at odds, and they had moments, they had these conferences, and they did this routinely where they discussed things that may be good and maybe bad, or things that they liked or disliked about what was going on throughout the day. And then they would set goals to make it work. And I have the feeling that that is a powerful tool, to do it's like a companionship inventory,
Yeah.
is what they call it. And I think that takes work, and that takes commitment, and it takes humility and a willingness and a belief that it's important enough,
Yeah.
to delve in.
So tell us some of your sources of inspiration, because
Oh
you're
my
someone with so much wisdom and so much willingness and openness for the work of life. What fuels you? What are the different sources that fuel you?
Well, we've talked about, on the side, not during this
Yeah.
video, but the issues around us, how there's so much, um, I guess there's so much of a disarray in terms of what's going on within the country. There's argument about the government. There's, the coronavirus pandemic that's created such an influx of just confusion, as to where it came from, how it was caused, who to point the finger of blame to, all of this. And basically it affects our sanity, and our peace of mind. But one of the heroines that have always come into my mind whenever I've had difficult times is Anne Frank.
Hmm.
Anne Frank, she wrote everything down in her journal, and she talked about her relationships with her family, with her friends. She talked about how important it was to think yourself out of a situation, and use your imagination and remember all the beautiful things that you're able to experience. She imagined the flowers and the crocuses and the violets growing down the slopes when she walked with her father. And that helped her to recall the goodness of people who were risking their lives for them, and the dearness of friendships. And at that point, she was thinking of Peter, her friend, whom she was trying to console at that time.
Mhm.
And those things, for her, it made her feel closer, not just to herself, but to God,
Mhm.
and gave her the peace that she needed. And I feel that she's a perfect example,
Mm.
and that's basically what I actually follow. I I think myself out.
Mm.
You may call it meditation. You may call it prayer.
Mhm.
Those are the things that I do. Fast.
Mhm.
I fast with a purpose. I just don't starve myself.
Mhm.
I fast and I pray and think about what it is that I'm fasting about, and sacrifice that time,
Mm.
thinking about what is most important
Mm.
and what I'm hoping to get help from, from the powers that be.
Mm.
So she's definitely one of my heroes. Another one is Esther. I was
Mhm.
thinking of Esther, you know, Queen Esther, amazing, Israelite woman. She became queen of a Persian king, talk about, getting married outside of your religion, it's just like, whoa. But she had the power and the courage to stand up and speak,
Mhm.
and she saved her people from genocide,
Mhm.
just by being herself, by
Mhm.
being true to what she believed. I think that that's what's most important. I think that if we can remember who we are and where we're coming from, and remember that we're not alone, because she could have just said, oh, well, I'm Queen of Persia. I've got other obligations now. Oh, those are the people from the past, I don't know them. She didn't do that. She remembered. She remembered. And I think that's what it's all about, remembering that we're all in this together,
Mhm.
and we need to help one another and be kind.
Mhm. That's beautiful. You have so much wisdom and goodness to share, and you're putting out in the world, and you're such a model for all of us in so many ways. So just want to thank you so much for being a part of this. I know our classmates will be inspired by hearing your story and hearing your insights and just having the chance to connect with you, albeit virtually, but perhaps sometime in the not too distant future, we can all gather together again and keep up the conversation. And thank you so much, Liz, for being here. It's really been a pleasure.
You're so very welcome. It was my pleasure, deeply my pleasure, truly. I can't tell you enough.
Thank you.